All right, we are live. Welcome to Scrolling X with the Salty Boomer for Tuesday, October 29th. 1 week away from the big history changing election. It'll change history no matter who wins. So, before I get going, I just want to tell YouTube that this site and this channel is pure satire. These are the ravings of a lunatic. Nothing I say is true, as I am a known liar. Nobody should believe anything I say. And with that said, what I do here is we scroll X in real time and see what's going on in the news and current events. So, without further ado, let's do that. Let's see what we got going on today on X. Jack says a whistleblower claims that James Comey had FBI spies infiltrate Trump's 2016 campaign, accompanying President Trump and his campaign staff on the trail. Yeah, it's interesting that, we're just now finding out about this stuff 8 years later. How's that work? Laura Logan says, have you noticed the shift? Can you see how the messaging from the left is now more focused on what happens after the election than the election itself? That tells me they know they cannot win on votes. It's over. They know it is too big to rig. The cheat will fail, although they're trying right now. They have shifted their main line of effort to preventing Trump from ever taking office. Yeah, that Congressman Raskin came out and flat out said they are not going to certify the election if Trump wins. I mean, could be all bluster and talk. We'll see. Anyway, that seems to be the plan for the leftists right now. Yeah, here's cops blocking the door in Pennsylvania and not letting people go in. I'll tell you something, the cops, they are the enforcement arm. They get paid to enforce the orders of tyrants. They don't care. Cops will do what they're rewarded to do. They're supposed to, take an oath to the Constitution to protect it. But, just like we witnessed in COVID, the cops will enforce the orders of the tyrants. DC Drano says they're not calling us Nazis in the final week before the election because they think they're winning. They're losing and they know it. It could be, but I don't know how calling at least half the country, I think it's way more than half, but I don't see how calling them Nazis is going to get people to come over their side and vote for them. And I've been saying this since last week. I think they're planning to whip up their Antifa rioters to burn, loot, and mayhem our communities. Yeah, watch out next week, boy. If you live in big cities, probably not even just big cities, any cities where there's congestion of people, the leftists are going to be out of their minds if and when they do lose. We'll have to see how bad they try to steal and if it works for them or not. Lots of things, but the difference is now people are documenting it. People are aware of it, so we'll see what happens. Restricted burn zone of Lahaina after Maui fire. See this destroyed area? Resident exposes he is still being forced to pay a mortgage. They gave us $700 and then said you guys are denied insurance benefits. All right, let's see what this guy's had. Because this is where I live, on Maui. I mean, I don't live in Lahaina where the fire happened. I live on the other side of the island in Kihei. But it has devastated our island, and it's been over a year. So let's see what he has to say.
big.
Yeah.
Nobody has the blueprints for it, and nobody could just figure it all out at once. But at the same time, it's 8 months later. We have no control over when this gets done. It's up to.
Okay, this is actually old. That's 8 months. That was actually so that would have been in June of this year. These are all cleaned up now. I know that for a fact. All this stuff is gone. They're graded over with gravel. There are building permits being uh, handed out, and there's already houses rebuilt. It's very, very slow, and who knows what's going to happen with the oceanfront property. But this is an old video, and we're going to move on. Keith Olbermann, one of the craziest dudes on X, says that Joe Rogan is a lazy, entitled, self-important douchebag looking for an excuse not to get erased by the vice president. Yeah, because she's so witty and clever and quick, and she would just demolish Joe Rogan. Now, I'm one that thinks Joe Rogan is pretty clueless on most things. I mean, he has the #1 podcast. But if you listen to it sometimes, people will tell him something and he's like, what? He's pretty clueless. But what happened was Joe said, for the record, the Harris campaign has not passed on doing the podcast. They offered a date for Tuesday, which would be today. He wrote this a couple of days ago. But I would have had to travel to her, and they only wanted to do an hour. I strongly feel the best way to do it is in a studio in Austin. So he wants her to come to the studio like everybody else does. She wanted him to travel to her and only make it an hour, which, they could hem and haw for an hour. 3 hours is a whole different story. And, of course, the lefties and Oberman are all up in arms about it. Let's see. We don't know about that. Yeah, Nikki Haley is not someone that Trump should trust. She is one of the Bush holdovers, the never Trumpers, the warmongers like Liz Cheney. I would not trust Nikki Haley anywhere around my administration. I don't know if that's true, but okay. Now, this would be good. Yeah, and I agree with Heidi here. J.D. Vance will be going on Joe Rogan's podcast tomorrow, which would be Wednesday the 30th. J.D. Vance, and I agree with Heidi here, J.D. Vance does interviews better than Trump does. You can't stump this guy or make him look silly or bring up something he doesn't know how to answer. He's really good. He knows what he's talking about. And looking ahead, which, wow, here we go. Campaigning for 2028 starts on November 6th. It's really exhausting, but J.D. Vance will be next in line, and I really like that guy. Okay, Kamala Harris says, as president, I will build an economy that works for all Americans to ensure everyone has the opportunity not to just get by, but to get ahead. And everyone always asks her, why haven't you done that already? And, she has to make up some bullshit because there is no answer for why hadn't you done it already. All right, let's see. Luis Renan Bonilla Alfaro, an illegal from Honduras, was arrested in Louisiana after he admitted to raping multiple children as young as 4 years old. That's the kind of people that are coming across our border. And I was arguing with the people on X today, telling them how I am a one-issue person at this point, and it is the open border. And it's amazing. The people that will argue with you are so programmed and brainwashed by CNN and MSNBC and all the other networks, for that matter, telling them that the border is not open. They have no idea there's an open border, and they will argue with you that it is not open. As tens and millions of people pour into our country illegally to replace you because they've lost the battle of ideas. Let's see. Dr. Sunil Dan says, trust me, any doctor who fires you or your kid for not taking a vaccine was not a doctor you ever wanted to see in the first place. Agree. It's an absolute travesty that the first thing that happens to your baby as soon as they're born is they give them a shot of vitamin K. Your baby doesn't need vitamins. Do not let them do that. How could anybody, a normal thinking person, think that injecting a newborn baby with poison is a good first start? It's a good first start for the medical industry because they're creating a lifelong patient, but it's not a good start for your baby's health. And remember, nothing I say is true, as I'm a known liar. You'd be crazy to listen to anything I have to say. Vancouver resident goes to the scene of the burned ballot box, and he shows that there's a camera right next to the ballot box. So this is a ballot box that someone burnt up yesterday. Who knows how many votes? There's a camera right there. But you won't see anything about it because, they won't show you who did it. Kamala Harris says, I made a promise to the people of our country. I will fight for you regardless of who you vote for and be a president for all Americans. Here is my closing argument. Well, she must have changed her mind because last week she was calling half the country Nazis and she was calling Trump Hitler. So she must have changed her mind. Border Patrol agents rescued 4 migrant children abandoned by human smugglers on a raft in the Rio Grande. And nobody knows what happens to these children. Border security is the number one thing we have to get figured out. I know we need to lower grocery prices and get inflation under control, but you can do that pretty quickly as long as you solve the energy crisis. The real crisis is having an open border. It needs to be immediately shut down and those people all sent back from where they came from. All right, we got to get rid of the rhinos. We know that. Kamala says Trump's ads about her supporting transgender surgeries for inmates is misinformation. Okay, let's see if it's that information. Because Kamala says transgender surgeries for inmates is her saying that is misinformation.
When I was Attorney General, I learned that the California Department of Corrections, which was a client of mine, I didn't get to choose my clients.
Right, a client of the Attorney General.
A client of the Attorney General, right. Of the Office of Attorney General.
Is that a man? Oh, of course. She's talking about transgender issues, so of course that's a man. Okay, let's listen.
That they were standing in the way of surgery.
For prisoners.
For prisoners. And there was a specific case. And when I learned about the case, I worked behind the scenes to not only make sure that that transgender woman got the services
she means a man
she was deserving. So it wasn't only about that case. I made sure that they changed the policy in the state of California so that every transgender inmate in the prison system would have access to the medical care that they desired and need. And I believe it was not only, I know it was historic in California, but I believe actually it may have been one of the first, if not the first in the country, where I pushed for that policy.
Well, there you go, right from the horse's mouth. And now she says Trump's ads about her supporting transgender surgeries for inmates is misinformation. How about that? That is craziness. I think I'm going to repost this. Kamala must not understand the internet because it's right there in her own words. All right, continuing on. If Kamala actually did a 3-hour podcast with Joe Rogan, how do you think it would go? Let's see what some of the people think of how that would go. All right, very well. She'd win over voters with her deep understanding of politics and sway the undecideds with relatable anecdotes of being brought up middle class. Yeah, she keeps bringing up she's from the middle class. Joy says, I think it would be a catastrophe unless she was drunk. This is what I like to do too is, I don't do it much on this show, but read through, you really get a sense of what's going on just from reading replies. I don't think it could get any of her supporters to tune in, but if they did, the polls would surge against her even more. Yeah, that's what I kind of figured the replies would be like. All right, moving on. Kamala is playing YMCA at a rally tonight. Same like Trump does. Okay, well, all right, whatever. Okay. Elon Musk says fraud. This is third world corruption. Swing state Georgia. Democrats are suing to prevent Dropbox surveillance. Yeah, we talked about this yesterday. Yeah, 12 hours ago. It's fraud. There's only one reason you would ever sue to prevent Dropbox surveillance. Can you guess what that would be? Whoa, Steve Kirsch says normally when they retract the paper, they leave the paper and slap a retracted notice on it. This paper was way too damaging to the narrative, so they wiped all traces of it. Yeah, that's what they do. Rewrite history, claim they never said it, claim they never did it. We just saw an example of Kamala saying it's misinformation that she said she was for prisoners getting their transgender surgeries. And think of that too. Now you have some male prisoner. He sees this and just goes, I'm a woman. Put me in with the women's prisoners. Can we please stop pretending that men can become women and get back to sanity? All right, breaking news. It is time to increase our momentum. Donald Trump is currently polling at 40% for early voting, which is historic compared to 2020, which had the highest turnout in modern history. This means liberal voters are voting for Trump. Yeah, well, the McDonald's thing ruined the lefties. Here's another one. Joe Rogan basically rejects Kamala's interview because he wants it at his studio. Like every other person that goes on his podcast does, including Trump and including Vance tomorrow. Every single guest. Rogan's never traveled anywhere to do a podcast with anyone at any time. But suddenly he's supposed to do it for Princess, I mean. Okay, there's his pumpkin carving. Looks like Trump with a MAGA. Wouldn't it be super ironic if the company responsible for all the most egregious acts of censorship and election interference in the last decade had a company motto like "Don't be evil"? That would be nuts. Yeah, that's Google's motto. And they are definitely the most censorship company. Okay, let's keep going on. This is the last day you can request a ballot. All right, let's Kamala's answer on what she says when The reporter says people can't afford groceries or their rent, which is what real Americans care about and want to hear what the president candidate will do for them to lower grocery prices.
What's your message to Michigan voters in terms of the economy? We have auto workers who are being laid off and those who fear that they might be laid off. The average person can't afford groceries or their rent. And recent polls in Michigan show that Michigan voters believe that Donald Trump would do a better job with handling the economy and bringing jobs back. What do you say to that?
Well, let's start with this. I come from the middle class, and I'll never forget where I come from. My mother worked very hard. She, by the time I was a teenager, was able to save up for our first home. And I understand.
Well, they cut it off there, but that's how she always talks about it. Well, I grew up in the middle class. Okay, whatever. I mean, why don't we ever hear from her parents, by the way? It's really interesting that we never hear from her parents. I wonder why that is. There must be a pretty good reason why her mother and father, who should be so proud that they have a daughter as candidate for the President of the United States. And I do believe he is a professor at Stanford. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe he's a professor at Stanford. And we never hear a peep from the proud father gushing about his daughter being a presidential candidate. It's very weird indeed. My body, my choice, unless they want to inject you with an experimental mRNA vaccine with no long-term safety data. The hypocrisy is astounding. Yes, it is. And let's never forget that they did that. Bucks County resident tells me this officer was angrily telling voters they couldn't vote today. You better get back. You better listen to me. Well, like I said earlier, the cops are the enforcement arm of the tyrants, and they will do what they get paid for and ordered to do. It doesn't matter what it is. They are order followers, and it doesn't matter what it is. They will enforce whatever the tyrants tell them to enforce. Okay, carrying on. Tim Walz doubles down on his comparison of Trump's Madison Square Garden rally to a Nazi rally. He thinks half the country are Nazis. What did Kamala just say? Okay, let's see what this clown boy says about it.
You said over the weekend, referring to it, there's a direct parallel to a big rally that happened in the mid-1930s at Madison Square Garden. Well, you were comparing that rally to a Nazi rally?
Look, I'm comparing it to the hate that came out of this, and I think they confirmed that.
You stand by that comparison, though, to a Nazi rally?
Look, the rally, you saw it for yourself. I'll let the American public make the decision of what they saw.
What about you, though?
So I know what I saw, and I'll just leave it at that.
Okay, more non-answers. Typical for politicians, so I guess. Kamala Harris FEMA is a money laundering operation. Yeah, wow. People are just figuring this out. So is foreign aid. So is appointing $7.2 billion for charging stations, and they built 8 stations. So is $42 billion in revenue for hooking the nation up to internet, and not one person has been hooked up. All of those are money laundering operations. Let's see what they say here.
Okay, so the big problem with FEMA, besides the 750, is when I went to the town council meeting this morning to let them know that I am available for hire and have heavy machinery and can and want to participate in the cleanup. Not one of those people, not one of the cars had a North Carolina license plate. think there's a problem with that.
So they're hiring workers to come into North Carolina that aren't even local.
The contractors, and the contractors bring with them all their people from
That are not
out
local.
of state.
Okay.
Yeah. And
Sounds about right. FEMA is not looking after your best interests. Imagine that. All right. More voter goofy stuff. We're on day 3 of the media acting like it's the end of the world because a comedian made a joke. Yeah. A comedian made a joke about Puerto Rico, and it's the end of the world for the leftists. Hello, fellow scrollers. Well, hello there. That's what we're doing every day at 8 p.m. Eastern. I think it's kind of fun. The legendary Andrea Mitchell announcing on air that after 16 years behind the desk, she'll step back from daily anchor duties next year. Hey, I finally agree with Keith Olbermann on something. 15 years overdue, sadly. Yeah, I agree. I agree with Keith Olbermann. You won't hear me say that very often. Yeah. Harris, 48 hours ago. Trump is holding a Nazi rally at Madison Square Garden. Harris tonight. The fact that others disagree with us does not make them the enemy. They change their mind daily. See, when you've got nothing to run on, when you have no policies or ideas of how to fix what they're in charge of right now, it's really hard to come up with anything. I mean, when your whole policy is transgenders and LGBTQ and abortion and open borders, there's not much you can say about that that's going to convince anybody to vote for you. They never talk about lowering prices, driving down inflation, making us energy independent, securing the border. You'll never hear any of that talk. So they have to go with Nazi and that kind of thing. Fact checkers are claiming the CDC changed its definition of vaccines to prevent misinterpretation. That's a lie. The CDC changed it so pharma could sell their useless and harmful shots as vaccines and not face liability from the harms they cause. AP is a disgrace. That is absolutely true, and I have found that most fact checkers are actually fact blockers. And we never even heard of fact checkers until the mainstream media started losing control of the narrative. And the real truth started to come out from We the People media. And suddenly, a bunch of fact checkers appeared out of nowhere to tell all the people that they call conspiracy theorists, which is another made-up term to imply that you are crazy to question the official government narrative. So all the fact checkers are just government shills spreading their propaganda, which, by the way, Obama made legal in 2013 with the Smith-Mundt Modernization Act. That's why the media can lie to you and have no consequences. You're witnessing the power of the political system, a system put in place by our rulers, Victor Scott says. Someone can know about central banks, false flags, 9/11, the Illuminati, secret societies, New World Order, etc. Put someone they like on the ballot, it will go all out the window. And you will be labeled a crazy conspiracy theorist for bringing up any of these things. And many platforms other than X will ban you outright and get rid of anything you say, including YouTube. And remember, YouTube, nothing I say on this channel is true because I am a known liar. It is all pure satire, and these are the rantings of a lunatic. Well, our satanic overlords only have a few more days to take out the guy that is going to destroy them, says Buck. Well, I think he's being sarcastic there, but they apparently tried to get rid of him twice. Abby Phillip is a prime spreader of the fine people hoax. Yeah. People that just, and it's mostly, I would say mostly people of my generation, they only get their news from the TV. Specifically, ABC, CBS, NBC, CNN, or MSNBC. So they have no clue about things that are really going on because the media manipulates them and programs them. They call it TV programming for a reason. Think about this also. They call it broadcasting, which is casting a broad spell to program you. Words have meanings. Kevin O'Leary wants to release the hounds on government waste. Elon Musk is 100% correct. Yeah, I can't wait till he is in charge of the Department of Government Efficiency. A California judge just sentenced David DePape, the man who broke into Nancy Pelosi's home and attacked her husband with a hammer, to life behind bars without the possibilities of parole. Yeah, I don't think we're getting all the answers on that story either. But yeah, I mean, if you're going to break into someone's house with a hammer, you should expect consequences. However, with that being said, a lot of people that do some very bad things are just set loose the next day. The La Cruces, New Mexico City Council is considering installing dignified safe space centers for drug users. At these centers, users would be able to use any substance you want in any quantity you want via any mode of administration. I'm sure that'll take care of all the drug problems we have. Give them a place to set up and have at it. Yeah. Here's a typical white liberal woman out stealing signs. White liberal women are the very worst of our society. Hillary calls us deplorables. Biden calls us garbage. Trump calls us patriots. Vote, vote, vote. The visual Kamala Harris chose for her closing message was a speech in front of the White House, where she has been in power for the last 3.5 years, promising to do a bunch of things that she, for some reason, can only do if you give her even more power. Yeah, I mean, that's the message I've been saying too. They can't answer why haven't you done it the last 3.5 years, so they just continue to make nonsense up. Well, Pennsylvania is definitely having some issues with voting. Kamala Harris directly compares Donald Trump to Adolf Hitler, stating that the patriots at Normandy didn't die for America to submit to another tyrant. But then she calls for unity 10 minutes later. Okay, a lot of the Hitler stuff going on. Obama called rural people bitter clingers and racist. Clinton called half the country deplorable. And now Harris calls half Nazis. Seems to be the theme of what's going on. Rick Wilson says Trump won't pull a crowd of 75,000 people until he's sent to prison. At that point, hundreds of thousands of Americans will line the streets and cheer. I think there's going to be some disappointed people after next Tuesday. Of course, they'll probably drag it out for 2 weeks after that before they, find all the votes they need. All right. Seems to be a lot of repetition on here today. How does someone inject something into their body that has zero liability and a shitload of adverse effects, including brain hemorrhage, blood clots, heart inflammation, and death? See, that's the problem with no informed consent and no liability. In 1986, Ronald Reagan signed the bill into law that gave, I'm not even sure if it was a bill, that might be an executive order, which could be overturned at any time if it is. But anyway, Reagan gave vaccine companies immunity from liability in 1986. That's something that should be repealed or just flat out rejected. If it's an executive order, you can just reverse it. Okay. Before COVID, Gardasil was the worst vaccine unleashed on America. And like now, its dangers were covered up to sell more shots. Yeah, you got to ask yourself, okay, the largest damage ever paid in the history of mankind is paid by Pfizer. They had to pay $2.3 billion in damages for medicine that the FDA approved and encouraged you to take. And another thing about vaccines is not only should they lose their immunity from, their immunity from liability. It should be like alcohol. They should not be able to advertise it on TV or radio or anywhere else. Just like alcohol. No. I'm sorry. My bad. They very much can run ads on alcohol and do nonstop. It should be very much like cigarettes and tobacco, where you cannot run ads. All this, ask your doctor if this is right for you. Side effects include blah, 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 blah. Ask your doctor if this is right for you. Those ads should be taken off of TV. They should lose their immunity to liability. It says it all when Pfizer had to pay one lawsuit, not the thousands that they've had to pay. $2.3 billion they had to pay one time. It might have been this one, Gardasil. I'm not certain about that. All right. Joe Biden says that all Trump supporters are garbage. Well, let's see. I guess people are saying he didn't say this. Let's see if he says that.
Or Puerto Rico, where I'm in my home state of Delaware, they're good, decent, honorable people. The only garbage I see floating out there is his supporters.
Well, Joe Biden thinks if you are a Trump supporter, you're a piece of garbage. All fair in love and politics, I guess. Joe Biden won't like it when he's indicted for bribery. Yeah, Joe Biden is one of our most corrupt politicians. He's been in office for almost 50 years. He's never held a real job. He's never produced anything. He has enriched himself through corruption in Ukraine, money laundering, his son being on the board of Burisma, a chemical company that has nothing to do with us. It's in Ukraine. It just goes on and on and on. You remember the clip of Joe Biden threatening that prosecutor in Ukraine with $1 billion if he doesn't get fired. Well, son of a bitch, he said, they fired him. Joe Biden is one of the most corrupt politicians of my entire lifetime. And for him to call Americans garbage, pathetic. Yeah, the police officers blocking the door. We talked about that earlier. Forgive me for sounding like a broken record, but Hillary Clinton was up in the polls too. There's a Kamala voter. Do you judge a person by what they drive? I don't, but a lot of people do. All right. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. says the Supreme Court has unfortunately today sided with the Secretary of State of Michigan and Wisconsin to undermine election integrity and leave my name on the ballot. Yeah, that's a political move in the hope that people that would have voted for him will just go ahead and vote for him. And so technically that's a vote taken away from Trump. They're doing anything they can. I just think it's going to be way too big to rig this time around. I could be wrong, but I think there's going to be such an overwhelming turnout that if they do, it's going to be so blatantly obvious that, they can't possibly get away with it. Well, that remains to be seen. Okay. I don't know what that one is. Pfizer building surrounded in Paris with people yelling assassins. Yeah, this is just not a United States issue with Big Pharma. It is a worldwide issue. And there is also a report of Bill Gates going on trial in the Netherlands. When will that trial be? 2050? Who knows? But people are waking up. This woman ruined her face. That's quite astonishing. What the hell is that? I don't even want to know. Okay, here we are in Pennsylvania again. Buses carrying non-English speaking citizens with Harris wall stickers reportedly bypassed Americans who had waited in line for hours to cast early votes. These individuals were guided through the voting process by a few translators, cutting ahead of others waiting in line. In another area of Pennsylvania, a mysterious figure with Rhode Island plates was spotted making a last-minute drop-off of a large stack of ballots. Well, that's what we have to do to try to stop it. Hopefully, whoever saw that got the pictures of the Rhode Island plates of this person dropping off a large stack of ballots. And here, let's go ahead and watch this for a second. Happening in Pennsylvania. Here's Americans waiting in line and people who have crossed the border illegally getting shuffled to the front of the line and shown how to vote. This kind of stuff needs to be documented, and it is, and it cannot be let stand.
No, they had these people, they had about 12 of them walked in, they were all foreigners, and then they took them up, these younger people helped them to fill out, they say vote PA today,
yep.
And then
vote
they took
today,
them up,
PA. Yep.
and somehow they beat a 2-hour line, and then they walked up, and the one lady, they were even asking her, they're like, we don't have you in the system, your name's not right, and they're like, oh, well, we'll take it back and change it.
Yeah.
How do you change your damn name?
Exactly, yeah. Well, thank you.
It's just not right, and it shouldn't happen, and it should not be let go. You cannot just have voter fraud open like this. And you know what happened in 2020 is a travesty, but we didn't have the documentation that we have this time. But even back then, the only reason nothing ever happened is because the courts did not hear it. The courts did not allow any of the evidence to come in. I don't know how many cases there were. I think there was like 60 some of them. And most of them were dismissed because of not having standing, whatever that means. I mean, we're Americans. We're Americans. We have standing in our voter issues, no matter what the case is. We'll see. We'll see if they get away with it. Yeah, here we go. The steel is on, but we're catching it in 4K. Their people, illegal invaders, are always put above the American people, at least until January 2025. The entire Harris campaign is a psyop. Yeah, this is the thing. We're catching it in 4K. So we'll see. We'll see how it all plays out. But there's going to be anger after next week, no matter what happens. All right. So Biden's all over the place. Let's see what happens here with this, which Rich Eisen calls Dumb and Dumber. Looks like one of those situations where a fan is going to reach over into the stands and prevent someone from catching it.
Fly to right by Torres. Betts in the corner. Does he have room? Fights with the fan. And they're going to say that it's an out.
Well, the guy just took an at bat away from his team, but it also looked like the guy caught it. So it was an out either way. All right. Yeah. Biden calling well, they keep saying half the country. It's way more than half the country. Okay, Kennedy still on the ballot. Nazis. Well, let's see. What else we got going on here today? Steve Kirsch just applied to join the vaccine safety net program by the WHO. My site qualifies. Well, that's good because he is a big proponent for people that have become vaccine injured and the government ignores them. Kamala Harris says, as president, I will invest in the industries that built our country: steel, iron, and the great America auto industry. Yeah, I don't know. Why don't I believe her? Oh, my goodness. When I am president, we will quickly remove those who arrive here unlawfully. You know what? If she is actually saying that, that's going to cost her votes. Newsflash to you, Kamala. That's going to cost you votes. That's going to make your own base mad. Kamala's closing message: Trump will put you in camps if you don't elect her. All right, let's see what she says about that.
Donald Trump.
I can't hear you.
Intends to use the United States military against American citizens who simply disagree with him. People he calls, quote, the enemy from within.
Okay, I don't see where she said that he'll put you in camps. So, you know, the Republican side lies also. And just so you're clear on where I stand on this, I think this is a huge election. I think they're, two wings of the same bird. The Republicans and Democrats are both owned by a foreign nation. However, I do believe that this election is important to turn our country back into a productive country. And I don't think somebody that's the most incompetent person that I have ever seen in a presidential election in my lifetime is the person to do it. So I am for Trump, but I believe both parties are controlled by the same people. Okay. Well, let's see. We kind of covered that already. The Atlantic has endorsed Kamala Harris. That's how it's done, says MM. Well, not if you want to, if you don't want to kill your credibility by endorsing a candidate. That means anything you write now has to be taken with a grain of salt because it's biased. And also, the Atlantic, if you didn't know, is owned by Steve Jobs' ex-wife, who was many times seen with Ghislaine Maxwell, a partner of Epstein's. That's who owns the Atlantic. One gigantic web of corruption. What is this now? RFK Jr. says Donald Trump has promised him control of the public health agencies. To this guy, that's terrifying. To me, that's encouraging. It is time to revamp the FDA, the CDC, the FTC, and other pharma-captured agencies. Absolutely. There's a revolving door of people that should go agency to agency, and Larry Cook doesn't mention it, but there's also the lobbyists who are an agency of themselves. And you get politicians who leave Congress and then become a lobbyist and then get appointments at the FDA and the CDC and the FTC and all the other agencies that Big Pharma controls and runs with their money and their clout. That's why it's hard to get change. And that's why I'm against Republicans and Democrats. They're all in on it. How hard have the Republicans been fighting the last few years against anything the Democrats do? That should tell you right there. They never stand up for anybody. When Steve Bannon got thrown in jail for ignoring a subpoena like Hunter Biden did, they never stood up and said, "Hey, what is this two-tier justice?" Nah, they don't say anything like that. Okay, I don't know what that's about. Yeah, going on your knee in public, not knowing the outcome, it's a dangerous proposition. Looks like he's getting a lecture there. I don't think this is working out how he maybe thought it would. What could be more embarrassing than that? Elon Musk claims that ending the Federal Reserve is necessary. I could not agree with that more. The Federal Reserve, which is not federal and has no reserves, is the reason one in particular, presidents have been eliminated. So it's going to be interesting because Trump is talking about ending income tax and ending the Federal Reserve, and that means the bankers who run our country, I think you know who I'm talking about, the same people that run Congress, the only nation, Israel, that does not have to register as a foreign agent. Why is that? They contribute to the campaign of Democrats and Republicans. They own the media. They were involved in everything with COVID. And they are the only nation that does not have to register as a foreign agent. They also are behind the Federal Reserve, which controls our money supply. So ending the Federal Reserve, I hope they're just not talking about it just to get elected. But we'll be here to hold their feet to the fire if they are. I don't think I want to watch that for 3 minutes. Okay, if I'm reading these blob tea leaves correctly, it appears the New York Times will release a bombshell in perfect timing with the election. This shocking info will prompt Congress to demand the Department of Justice, immediately take action, thus shutting down the most prominent voices of the right at the most critical time, all under the guise of election integrity. What is that? What are they talking about? Oh, yeah, the New York Times is getting ready to do a hit piece on 30 conservative people, influencers, and they're relying on analysis conducted by researchers at Media Matters, the most biased organization in the media, a pure propaganda company. And don't forget who made propaganda legal. That would be Obama. All right. Let's see what else we've got going on here today. What? Bill Ackman, what's he talking about? The 94 executive actions taken within days of Biden becoming president and the very porous border of unvetted people coming into the country. Let's take this. This is Bill Ackman. He was a big time liberal at one time. Let's see what he has to say.
Sure. By the way, I said this is a really important issue, and I think again, if the world blows up in a nuclear holocaust, the domestic problems are relevant, right? That's one of my issues, right? Number two is probably the way the border has been managed, right? The reversal of 94 executive orders within days of Biden becoming president.
Wait a minute. I was just told a few minutes ago that there's no problem at the border. 94 executive orders that they overturned in the first few days of being in office.
And the very porous border of unvetted people coming into the country, a couple 100,000 migrants coming to New York, 20,000 to a city of 40,000, in Springfield, and growing crime in cities. And I think that's very unsettling and damaging to the country, and it sets up for, how many terrorists came into the country, how many murders, how many criminals from Venezuela. We don't know who they are and what the numbers are. And so I think that, my family came here as immigrants in the 1890s. Big believer that immigration is part of the strength of the United States, right? We get the most motivated, best and brightest entrepreneurs and people, aspiring families from all over the world who come here and want to take their family, want to come to a place where there's free speech, supposedly, and where they can live their lives in the land of.
Yeah, not on platforms like YouTube or Facebook or TikTok or anywhere else. Google. X is the closest thing of the platform to free speech.
Opportunity, but I'm a big believer in legal immigration, and I think we've allowed illegal immigration to get completely out of control, and I think that gets resolved on day one of a Trump administration.
There's all these conspiracy theories about illegal immigration.
There you go, conspiracy theories making you sound like you're crazy because you're bringing up something that is actually a fact. That's how they attack it.
And I understand why we have illegal immigration in the UK. It's a legal issue and it's to do with the European Court of Human Rights, blah, blah, blah. But why is it in America? Because I don't understand why there is effectively an open border.
You've even got guns, Bill.
Yeah.
Yeah. Look, I think the argument, which is, I would say becomes to sound compelling, is that you have one political party who views, these immigrants as potential supporters of a party. Elon Musk makes the point that, California was not a definitively Democratic voting state until a lot of immigrants came into California and the politics of the state changed. You can envision, Elon Musk makes the argument this is the last election because of the number of migrants that have come in that if legalized and become voting members of society, if they vote left, then the United States becomes California politically.
And that's exactly right. That's the issue. That's why I feel it's important that Trump wins this time, because if the leftists win, that's pretty much it as far as ever winning another election, because they will not close the border. When they see that they're in power for another 4 years, they will flood this country with illegals, granting them immunity, and that will be that. That's why this is so important to beat the leftists in this election. And I'm going to finish up with that right there today. I appreciate you coming on and listening and being with me. And let's do it again tomorrow at 8 p.m. Eastern Time when we scroll X and see what's going on in the news and current events and talk about it. Thanks for being here. Go ahead and give it a like if you want to. Follow me on X at salty_boomer. And I will see you next time. Aloha.